scheduled. I don't know if it's considered regular or not, but this is the scheduled meeting of the Subcommittee on Rules for the City Council. We are being audio and video recorded. With us here so far, I'm John Oliver. I'm the chair of the subcommittee. We have with us in order on my screen, Councilors Humphrey, Maliki, Baker, Farrell, and Lucas. As I mentioned a second ago, Councilor Krinsman will be with us in a couple of minutes. So we'll just give Councilor Baker a minute here to come back in. I don't think we have members of the public here, at least at this point. I can't understand why people aren't here on a Thursday night at 7 o'clock for this topic, but we'll hook them eventually. So I think just kind of stepping into this briefly, I believe that the note that we have in the packet from this past Friday, I just want to pull that up, explained that we have roughly 12 to 15 items here. I didn't count them, most of which are from previous terms, items that either were tabled or not discussed to finality, several of which I think might be in order to take up tonight or to start talking about tonight. But I will start here by saying we're going to have at least two meetings, including tonight, of the subcommittee. The goal is to be able to report out by end of calendar year to the full city council the items that we are considering and any items that we will have completed, if there are any. And then by the end of the term, we will have revised rules for the full city council to vote on. The goal there would be to have that done in the early to mid-September timeframe of 2025, so that we can vote those out in full city council before the end of the term. Does that make sense? Any questions about those particulars? And I also acknowledge that this is my first time working with the rules of the city council. And I would imagine that everyone else here has worked with them, including Councilors Humphrey and Baker. So if there are any, yeah, there we go, Councilor Baker.
I just want to say I admire your ambition. It may be a little tricky to do this by the end of the year, but I think if we can do it, if you think about getting it done by budget, that may be easier to do. But that's just because of some Thursday nights I'm going to have trouble being here, but I'll do the best I can to be there.
Yeah, all I wanted to accomplish by the end of the calendar year is to have what I'm going to call the full list of items that we will discuss this term. And then by the end of the term, September of 25.
Oh, okay. I thought you were trying to get, okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry, misunderstood. Thank you. That's
no, and I may have misspoke. So there we have it. That's just kind of a quick outline, or top line, I should say. But one of the things that I was hoping we could talk about just right off the bat, and I know that the clerk's office has several items about the organization and formatting, I think, to a certain degree, given the way the rules are presented in the PDF that's available through the city's site. And I didn't know if we wanted to just, Carol or Jacqueline, if you wanted to just touch on what those overarching kind of formatting issues might be. And if not, that's okay. I might be putting you on the spot. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I can talk just briefly about it without having direct examples, but it's kind of disjointed. And I think over the years, as we've added, that maybe we've changed it in one place. I really want to look at it fully to make sure it flows well. I know that I've had a lot of feedback from the public that are a little confused about it. I've noticed Jacqueline, I think you can agree with me. I think there's sections where it looks like it just ends. Like it looks like it's almost cut off. And I can't think of where it is, but there's definitely, and it just happens over the years as we do it by hand, that maybe we didn't add it and it should have been something from before, but it just doesn't flow well when it comes to subject matter always.
Okay.
There's some great parts, but I think it would be great to review it a little bit.
Okay, well, when I last read through the rules, I didn't notice any gaps in the storyline. So they're probably fairly minor, unless you're referring to anything that was kind of left out of the rules.
I don't think it was that obvious.
Good.
I'll have
All
to,
right.
I will definitely have that highlighted next
Okay.
time.
I mean, I do notice little things like, if you look on page 12 under section 4, which is motions, the first item in section 4 is B. There is no
Right.
A. Little things
That's-
like that. I'm like, oh, well, okay, maybe that.
So that is exactly what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Okay,
Although
fantastic.
I guess I would just flag that sometimes that means something was removed previously that we should be aware of having been removed.
Right,
Right.
I'm gonna have to look at prior issues of this versions.
And you
Right.
might put in like A deleted
Yeah,
in brackets.
And the other item that I believe was kind of under, kind of just cleanup or hygiene, I think was the term I used, was at the end of the rules as they're listed now. We have a summary of how the Financial Audit Advisory Committee works. And I think we were talking about integrating that into the whole, so it's not always kind of a, standout or, additional or addendum, additional file or addendum. Integrating that makes sense. And I believe the other item that made perfect sense in terms of just kind of, again, formatting was literally this process that we're embarking on right now is not covered anywhere. I believe was the other one, right? The other topic that we wanted to tackle in terms of talking about the process by which rules are regularly reviewed. Does that make sense, at least to the subcommittee folks, in terms of,
Yes.
like, I think it, from my perspective, at least, those we can just kind of green light and make sure, like, in the particular case I just called out, section 4, was A kind of deleted intentionally or accidentally, or how do we get that back in and just kind of resolve things like that? I do see how certainly the table of contents might be a little cleaner, that's for sure. And other than that, anything that we decide to include in the rules can be added to whichever article makes the most sense or is most appropriate, and we could create a new one if we needed to. At least I believe we can. I don't know of any reason why we would have to form fit them into our existing articles, right? All right. So with that said, one other thing I want to make sure that I'm mentioning is I have
I apologize,
spoken.
Counselor Oliver.
Yep, sorry,
just-
sir. Hello, sorry.
Hello, and I'm
Joining
sorry.
us is Counselor Krinsman.
Sorry, thank you. Do you mean like a subcommittee process? Because I believe rules of the council is already in there under the charge of the Committee on Programs and Services. But do you mean like spell out the process by which it happens as opposed
Yes,
to the
sir.
jurisdiction of it?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That was one of the items I believe was already kind of, it wasn't taken up in the previous term. Previous time we reviewed the rules as a council. It's on our list, and it seems to make sense, like we should talk about whatever process we deem to be appropriate.
We'll talk about it.
Okay. the other thing I want to mention in terms of kind of housekeeping things that that I have been doing. And by the way, if anybody wants to interrupt my ramble, just throw your hand up either physically or virtually, and well, please do interrupt. But I have been talking to other counselors to kind of make sure everyone's aware that we're going through this process. If they have anything that they want to consider having included, to let us know. I would encourage everyone to be doing the same thing. I believe there have also been a couple of comments made by the public of things they might want to see in here. So if that is indeed the case, I don't see anyone from the public here, at least at this point. But they can certainly reach out to counselors and kind of have those discussions as needed. Counselor Humphrey.
My recollection is that the previous time that we had convened, a couple terms ago, a number of members of the public had expressed interest, although not necessarily with specific recommendations, on rules changes to the process of how the full council meetings are run to make them, I guess, more legible to the public, I suppose you could say. Again, I don't recall hearing specific recommendations, but I did think it made a lot of sense. I mean, it's the type of thing where if you watch enough of them, you can get the hang of it, but you probably shouldn't have to as a member of the public. You should be able to go to a meeting and understand what's happening.
Sure.
And not be confused by, first call, second call, stuff like that, or what's coming up tonight versus next time, because the number one sort of point of confusion that I hear expressed on that from people in the public or the media is usually when they confuse the reports docket with the docket. So
Sure.
they think an item is getting voted on instead of being introduced that particular night. So just things like that are, could maybe streamline and clarify.
Sure, and that could come in the form, I would think, of some sort of a, subheader, for the reports docket or the docket, right? Just to say, hey, these items will be, discussed. These items are being voted on. These items are being added to subcommittee or to committee dockets. So that would make sense. If we want to kind of add that into the conversation at some point, but Councilor Baker.
Listen, I think there may be, as this conversation goes forward, there may be things that are rules changes and things that are just good practice. Because back before the pandemic, I did a series of TV things where we had explanations of the process of, it used to be called aldermen at work, then it was counselors at work, but that isn't available anymore. So I think that to the extent that the webpage for the city council and other documents can maybe have a link, even if you want to know how this works, just click here and we'll take you there. You don't want to explain it every time, but I'm sure that a simple one page, and the same for land use hearings and things like that. I think Councilor Humphrey's point is well taken, but I'm not sure it needs a rule. I just think this is the kind of thing that out of these conversations can come recommendations for just good process.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There was quite a bit of conversation, as you might imagine, in the the community dialogue conversation about just that, in terms of helping people, just making all the processes and the machinations we go through to be more accessible, more kind of understandable from the casual observer's perspective. So I think, to that end, Carol, Jacqueline, myself, and others, we do have a short list of things that we want to do there. I think it's going to be a matter of getting to them all, frankly. And one thing I would like to do, just because we're doing kind of or I'm kind of thinking about tonight, is more of an overview, kind of establishing what it is we're going to be doing, between now and the end of the year, and then subsequently by the end of the term. As I look through this list of possible inclusions, right, topics, I'm thinking through, like, who else do we want to talk to? before we kind of agree to put them in or not in terms of our recommendation to the full council. And I see like, you know, this first item in terms of the joint referral threshold, raising it beyond 50K. Like, we're gonna want to talk to the finance chair. You know, as I kind of go down this list, clearly the clerk's office is going to be with us in lockstep. I think the item that is labeled kind of reviewing departments under each committee, right? Adding to the PS&T workload, so to speak, or rebalancing, if you will, the work that kind of that goes to ZAP or that goes to PS&T or some of the other committees. I do believe, you know, that is going to be probably one of the topics that'll receive more of the, you know, perhaps the lion's share of the conversation. But I do wonder, you know, kind of going down this list, does anyone see other groups that we're going to want to make sure we tap into outside of the council? If any, for that matter? Because I do want to make sure we're lining people up.
The only group I think historically we've been advised by the law department from time to time. And as I just think that perhaps at maybe not every meeting, but if there's, you know, again, the department is sort of on call, but I think there may be situations where they will be of help. For example, there is a rule that we have that prevents a reconsideration of a land use item if it would push it past 90 days. That was where that specifically came about because of somebody who reconsidered an item and it went past 90 days and we realized that it was constructively granted and that was not a good idea. And so we modified the rules so indicate. And again, the law department may just have their own list of things that we might consider. They may not have it at all, but it's just, I certainly think that the city solicitor could welcome just an inquiry and say, we're going through this process. If anything you think of, we ought to be aware of, let us know.
Okay. I like that. I like that. Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Baker. We will need the law department on some of these, particularly I'm looking at the last item in the backup for the agenda, referral for special permits that are also seeking a rezone. We will need the law department to advise us on that because I have a series of questions. So if and when we get that, the law department would need to be invited to this committee meeting. Thanks.
And yeah, I think you're right. No, good call. Councillor Humphrey.
How about League of Women Voters?
I'm reluctant to go there myself.
In what context? What do you mean?
I mean, because I think that begins to get us into territory. I think we ought to try and work inside before we go out. And there's certainly an opportunity for the public in general. I'm not sure I want to pick any particular group and say, look, I want to hear from you specifically. That's just my personal preference.
And
then if we
Councillor
want to have
Humphrey,
a comment period, and we can invite anybody to come and offer comments.
sure. And then Councillor Humphrey, if you could why League of Women Voters?
Oh, the transparency and good government focus that they usually have. I mean, they're very process oriented. I don't always agree with their recommendations on everything, but.
Okay, interesting. All right. I haven't heard from anyone League of Women Voters wise on the process yet, but maybe they're warming up in the wings. I'm not sure. But fair enough. I appreciate that. And Councillor Baker, I tend to kind of agree in that I don't want to cherry pick, different groups from, across Newton to add to the workload here, but there might be some groups that comment, and I think some of them are probably worth a listen, that's for sure. Not to say that that's not what you're saying. All right. One question for those of you who have been through this, which again, I believe is everyone on the subcommittee except for myself. How have you traditionally gone through, like we have this list. Have you prioritized them in any way in the past that I should be aware of in terms of like, you know, just top to bottom or
My
big ones first?
recollection, and Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is the most recent time we did a sort of line by line through the rules, which I think did not ultimately serve us in terms of achieving as much as we could have, which is not to say that we got no results. And it maybe served an important purpose for that particular pass, but if that's what we did, I think I would recommend doing it against doing it that way this time.
Okay.
I think it would be better to go by category of thing.
Okay. And then in terms of the items that I'm going to consider to be in front of us, again, in the backup, is there any specific comment on these, just, you know, to this point? Like this one we've, you know, kind of discussed and dismissed, and or perhaps there's something on here that we shouldn't be taking up, or something that's missing to your mind? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor.
I think you know what I'm going to say here, which is what I emailed you, which is that I think that we considered and rejected the dress code item in 2 terms ago. And that the discussion that we had at that time was that that is very open to abuse and opens up avenues for sort of inappropriate policing of other people's attire, and that it's generally going to be more applied to women, though not exclusively, and that was just problematic overall. And in fact, if we are going to touch on this point, I would go in the opposite direction of adding a rule saying that members cannot comment on each other's attire. But I'm content with just letting it drop. But that is I feel that we had a very thorough discussion last time and came to a well-reasoned conclusion that we did not want to take that up. So from my perspective, that's a settled matter.
Understood. And I have been made aware of the fact that actually there was a best practices memo issued in 18 that did talk to dress code. And just for the record, I kind of agree. I don't think that we need to have a dress code. I believe that we're all aware of the circumstances and the context of what we're doing. I haven't witnessed anything inappropriate in terms of, you know, anyone's attire. So I would personally tend to agree. How do you feel about the rest of the code of conduct item, however, because it is
so
a broader, you know, the dress code is baked into that. It's not the
right.
entirety of it.
Well, I do think it would definitely be beneficial to establish some clear standards somewhere, although I don't know if it has to be in the rules versus in best practice memos in terms of remote participation stuff. For example, are there circumstances in which you can get permission from the presiding officer to have the camera off or whatever, right? Additionally, with absenteeism, maybe you have a system of excused absences, and you could even, if you really wanted an extra layer of protection, you could have it so that, you know, the president or the chair excuses an absence, but if a majority of the council or a supermajority of the council feels that was an inappropriate decision either to excuse or not excuse an absence, that could be overruled if you really wanted to belt and suspenders the rule on that point. In terms of the code of conduct part, yeah, I mean, we started that discussion a little bit at the end of last year. And I understand there's a need to be a little bit cautious about introducing something that can be weaponized to, declare somebody as engaging in inappropriate conduct and, sanction them because you just don't agree with them politically or whatever. I could see a scenario where that could happen. But I think given the unique sort of structure where we don't have an HR department and we work for the voters, and they can potentially hire us, so to speak, and then not remove us, despite the fact that we are treating a colleague abusively in some way, is kind of disturbing to have no sort of recourse provision on that. And I think that it's important, if you don't have an HR department or something like that, you have to have some sort of self-policing mechanism.
Because for me, it does come down to that matter, right? Like, whether you want to call that a self-policing mechanism, something akin to a sergeant at arms or something like that, we really don't have that mechanism. And I'm not quite sure that, beyond a censuring, right?
Right. Well, and we don't actually have a formal mechanism of censure either. And there's definitely been, some conduct that some people had questions about in terms of, especially election related things. And that, would go beyond basically what the law is and say, hey, you can't be doing this, if you're an elected official, something like that. And I understand, again, there are drawbacks here. And I understand that some people feel that it hasn't been a problem or hasn't risen to this point. But clearly some people do think it's a problem. And obviously, Councillor Noel filed the item at the end of last year to open that discussion. And she wasn't trying to be specifically vindictive. She was just saying this has been an ongoing issue. And it has been my experience as well. Like, I definitely feel there has been, in the time that I've been here, that I have seen and witnessed and heard inappropriate remarks and inappropriate conduct. And it is, in a sense, a workplace, and people should not be subjected to that in the workplace. And I have had situations where I've told someone directly to stop saying something to me, and they just don't. And I'm not saying it's easy to solve this problem, but to say that therefore the solution is to not have any sort of code of conduct doesn't make any sense to me.
Understood. Councilor Baker?
Well, again, this is an historical perspective, but there is a provision in our rules about avoiding personalities and things like that. I remember. But this council is, I think, maybe I'm just looking back with a long lens, but I think it's pretty civil. There have been some councils in the past that I've been part of that I think the conversations would have been a lot more concerning. But I think that I'm really concerned about where this takes us as a process, because again, how we do this, generally speaking, what I've seen is the president has the ability to talk to somebody offline or even if there's a necessity, a public statement. And that's generally taken care of it. But the mechanisms of what it is and how it's enforced is really, I think, a challenge. But that's just, this is an area I'm not eager to enter, but the committee has to make a judgment about that. I just think that we've been an unusually congenial body. If you look at the national government or some of the state legislatures, we're a very different place. And I think one of the reasons that people admire the city council is because it is a different place. But that's just my sense. Maybe I'm sorry if Councilor Humphrey has been treated poorly, because I would rather not have happened to any of our colleagues, but I'm not sure the remedy is for the wrong. That's my problem.
Right. Right, and again, it goes back to the header of, hey, is this a rule or kind of a policy, an unwritten one, something we need to best practice, something like that? But Counselor Krinsman, thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, it sounds like it wasn't Counselor Baker who was harassing Counselor Humphrey, so that's good, because he's already apologetic, so it's good to know that,
I hope not.
at least from that angle, it didn't infiltrate this group. I think where we started this was there a way to proceed through this? I'll come back to the code of conduct in a second, because I do want to comment on that.
Yep.
But my advice, my recommendation, let me put it that way. My recommendation would be that we have 8 topics that have been suggested already, would be to take up 2 at a meeting, schedule a meeting when we're going to discuss 2 of them, each of us to come prepared to discuss those topics. If anyone wants to add additional topics, we absolutely can, and we can add, follow-on meetings to that. I would say that I don't know where I stand on a code of conduct, but I think we at least owe it to ourselves and to others to have that discussion. And I think that in part because, well, let me go back to one other thing. One of the things that was raised was, I think, like expelling a member, which I would actually argue that under state law and under the state constitution, I think the legal department would find that we do have the authority to expel a member. Set that aside for the moment, whether we actually do or don't, but I think we have that authority. I think I go back to my days on the Charter Commission. I don't know if you guys know that there was a Charter Commission that evaluated the charter of the city. But I raised that because one of the things we talked about was a recall provision for elected officials, which you probably noticed that in our charter, there is no recall provision for either city councilors or the mayor. And our conclusion as a commission unanimously was that for city councilors and school committees, no recall provision was necessary because the duration of the term is so short that you essentially have an election and an opportunity for the voters, as Councilor Humphrey said, the voters, the real bosses, to act if a member shouldn't be part of that body. And because the nature of recall provisions is that, you need it to happen so many months before the end of a term, usually 9 months before the end of a term, so that there's time to then schedule an election, hold an election, and swear in a new member. You may be able to do it a little bit quicker than that, but again, it's at least a few months if you're going to comply with, overseas voting requirements and things like that. So this is all to say that I don't think I would vote in favor of a code of conduct for which a remedy was expelling a member. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have a code of conduct and there shouldn't be other things that we could do. You can lose committee assignments, you can lose, different privileges. Again, I don't know if I'm in favor of it or not, but I'm more than happy to have that discussion and see if we can look at, maybe the code of conduct of some other communities, see if there's something that we can learn or glean from those and move forward. I say this all to back into your question, which was how do we proceed? Again, I think, we have 8, 2 per night. We can all come prepared to discuss those particular items scheduled for that night. And if we decide not to move forward on them, that's fine.
Right.
And maybe it's sort of one item that's a little bit more cleanup of the rules or make the rules read the way we all believe that the practice is happening now or should happen now. And another item that's a little bit more involved, So that's my suggestion.
All right, that makes sense to me. I'm sorry, is there somebody else? Yeah, Counselor Baker, go ahead.
So I'm actually persuaded by Councilor Klinsman's point, and that a conversation doesn't hurt us to take that up. I mean, I may come out in a different place than other members of the committee on the policy, but I think that the question is reasonable to ask. So that's it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that.
I can change my mind occasionally because of good argument.
Yeah, you're allowed. Hey, that's what keeps us coming back, right? Trying to persuade people, right, to our perspective. And personally, I would love to be able to persuade you, Councilor Baker, to any point of view that I've held ever, either in the past or in the future. But with that having been said, all right. I like the idea of, kind of putting these to a calendar. That would help greatly in terms of scheduling other folks to attend. Like I mentioned before, I think that the chair of finance should weigh in on the first item, even though I do believe that one is fairly straightforward. I would be curious to make sure that we're not setting the wrong threshold to 75 or 100K or even beyond that. But with that said, Counselor Krinsman.
Just to sort of supplement what I think folks have said about bringing in, maybe the chair of another committee. Obviously, every counselor can participate, as
Yeah.
we've said, in all these meetings. I think a special invitation to the chairs, for example, of land use, when we're doing the zoning issue, that one. But it might be wise to also look for previous chairs of those committees, whether they're still on the council or not. They may have some, wisdom that they may be able to impart on us about the way things either have worked or do work or should work based on their personal experience and expertise.
Yep, nope, that's wise as well. I appreciate that. I'm not, how do I want to say this? I'm not inclined to kind of belabor the conversation here tonight because I did just want to introduce the topics. I did want to get a sense of things. I didn't prepare like, hey, let's tackle the first 2 or 3 or whatever. But that does make sense to me. I'm actually already seeing, I'm seeing a pretty good typo on my behalf in terms of the looks like I listed DEI items, including Birdo, electrification, and cap in the wrong place, but we'll mop that up, or I'll mop that up. But unless there's anything else we need to cover tonight, because I have one I actually am lying, I have one additional thought. Like, and this is for the clerk's office. I am curious, like, there's this election coming up in the next couple of months here. I'm sure you're very busy with that. How long do you think you might need to kind of bring back the topic of, hey, here's a cleaned up version, given the topics that we've kind of talked about tonight?
Well, the committee clerks, they kind of luck out where they're not really involved with elections, but they are still very busy and we are down one. I can say that we have sent out an initial offer for our opening for committee clerk just today. So
Very exciting.
crossing my
Right.
fingers. So once she's in place, and kind of running a little bit, I don't see why, and we can continue to work on it now. Between Scott, myself, and Jacqueline, we can figure out some ways to tackle this. I don't really, and Jacqueline, feel free to speak as well, because this is your time. What the next month, just kind of go through and really spot the bad mistakes, and then we can fix those pretty quick, and then we can go through again to see about format. What do you suggest, Jacqueline? Because it would be more of you and Scott.
Definitely. I would agree in a month being an appropriate timeline to give it a thorough review.
Okay. So then I'll take that kind of and start to build a schedule around that for all the different items that we have on our, on our list or in front of us here. I'm kind of inclined to start, putting out some of these, I'll call them invitations for now, to certainly PS&T, finance, land use, ZAP. Although we have the chair and vice chair here. So, but not previous. So perhaps that's how I'll kind of tackle the creation of that calendar in terms of lining things up, because I do quite like the simplicity of, let's tackle these 2, let's tackle these 3, let's tackle these 3 next. And putting a calendar behind that for attendees seems to make sense to me.
When do you find the next meeting? Because I think that the 17th is one that I'm out of traveling, and I'd like to be here, but that's my own. That's October. I'm not sure about others, but
that sounds right. Jacqueline, is that right?
At the moment, the next meeting is scheduled for October 17th.
Right. And you wrote, so maybe we need to bounce that one around a little bit already for Counselor Baker. It's in my calendar, but
well, it
We'll
should
have a
be
look.
decisive, but I'm it's just that I've got flat out conference in Philadelphia and the flight sometimes take, you know, if you're trying to avoid paying a fortune, you end up right in the flight time of the meeting. And if I'm there, I don't mind getting online and being here. And unless there's an easy other date, I think you ought to presume that, but if Jacqueline could just look and see what else is available for the committee that we haven't already poached for some other reason, I would love to be able not to have to
Yeah.
come online from Philadelphia.
That's great, because it does feel to me like there are a lot of meeting dates bouncing around in terms of some irregular schedules and so on and so forth, working around, if nothing else, holidays and things of that nature. All right, so we'll take that under advisement in terms of the meeting date on the 17th. We'll see if we might be able to find another timeline there or another time to meet. I'll get some invitations sent out, see if we can get those set up. That might help us kind of pick a better date as well. But with that said, unless someone has something else, let's keep the first session short.
I will just say that occasionally we've met in the past before programs and services for a short, because the membership was always the same, was the subcommittee of the month. So those are just things to think about. Again, I don't want to mess up P&S programs and services agenda. We have the chair here, but to the extent that you've got a discrete topic and you can do something in an hour, you know, and we can get here
That's a great
earlier,
idea.
that's an economy.
Yep, I like that idea a lot, because I do think that some of these are going to take more conversation than others, for sure. So perhaps there are a couple we might be able to dispense of more quickly. Happy to do it.
Okay.
Everyone else all right? Counselor Humphrey, I hope you feel better. Everybody
Thank you.
else, thank you
Yeah.
very much. It is 7:42. I don't think I technically need a motion to adjourn. But is there anybody out there who'd like to issue that? Well, there we go, motion to adjourn. I'll second it.
All right.
All right, folks, you have a fantastic night.
And Councilor Humphrey, get better. I didn't know you were ailing so much. That's good.
Yeah, I think it's like strep or something.
Welcome back to the lower 48.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
All right.
Thank you.